We ended our last time together kind of summarizing that the reason we care about making disciples is because that's what Jesus called. But I want to start this week by talking about two other reasons why discipleship is important. The first reason is this. It's because Jesus' kind of life is the life you've always wanted. Our culture looks at faith as something that causes us to miss out on wonderful things. There's a sacrifice that when people look at faith, and Jesus in particular, they're worried that they're going to be missing out on something. I had a friend of mine once that was talking with some work colleagues of his, and they were talking about sex before marriage, and he just kind of said, listen, I didn't make up the rules, I just try to follow them. You realize that actually Jesus' approach to sexuality is a way to have the best sex life possible. You see, Jesus doesn't invite us to mere sacrifice. Sacrifice, suffering is a part of this gig. But the kind of life that we are moving to and that our suffering and sacrifice is helping birth in others is the kind of life you were designed for. And discipleship, if it's learning how to live Jesus' way, if it's learning how to access Jesus' kind of life, then that means being really alive. That means beginning to come into who we were designed to be in the first place. And if we can start to get that understanding clear in our mind, I think the discipleship process will be much more joyful, much more enjoyable. And we start talking a lot less about the cost of discipleship and actually start thinking more about the cost of non-discipleship, the cost of mere Christianity, the cost of mere conversion, because actually that's the worst of both worlds. The second reason why discipleship is important is because Jesus just didn't come to save people out of the sea like catching a fish with a fishing pole. Jesus came to birth of movement of life that was all about reclaiming the creation itself. That includes you and me, but that also includes the world around us from the effects, the virus of human rebellion and sin. So it's not just about saving your butt and my butt and getting us into heaven and out of hell. It's about, as we are rescued into the kingdom of God, then using us to have an influence on the world, the creation around us. So the second reason is this. The reason discipleship is important is because being the kind of people who live Jesus' kind of life is the point. It's not only good, it's also the point. Because He means for us to have an influence on our world around us. You are called to be influential. But at the end of our time, in episode 1, I shared that we were going to talk a little bit about how we begin to move into the actual being what the rabbi is. You remember the distinction we put down. It's not just doing what the rabbi does. It's not just knowing what the rabbi knows. It's actually being that kind of person that the rabbi is. And Jesus said, come follow me. And in doing that, spoke over us His passion that we can be like Him. So how can we access this? What's holding us back? I want to answer it by giving you 3 snags that we have right now to get over if we're going to move into this. The first snag is that we're Greek. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is this. You've been trained to be a student. You've been trained to acquire information. You've been trained to ingest ideas, to devour them. And if you're really passionate, devour them voraciously. Read, go to conferences, listen to MP3 sermons, watch stuff on YouTube. This is the stuff we've been trained to do. Why? Because we think ideas change people. And really we have to face the reality that that wasn't Jesus' approach, and that it doesn't work. We've had 500 years since the Enlightenment, Erwin McManus says. You'd think we'd get the point that it really hasn't made that big a difference. Information, ideas are important. They're explosive, but they are not the force that brings change. What brings change? Well, Jesus did what all the rabbis did. He took his disciples into real life with him. And then he gave them the opportunity to watch him do something, to do it with him, then to try it themselves, and then to debrief about it. Sociologists call this praxis. It's where in the acting on our ideas, the learning process actually takes place. The transformation process actually takes place. It's important that what we know, we act on. We practice what we know, and what we know begins the process only then of becoming who we are. It gets in. Questions, problems we have with it, unbelief about what we've been taught pops up when we're asked to act upon it. The Hebrews were very different than Greeks. You didn't know something, you didn't believe something unless you lived it. We can have lots of ideas in our head that we believe, and they never work their way out into behavior. Not for a Hebrew. So we're Greek. This is the first problem. And we need to learn how to integrate action into the learning process so that ideas inflame into being. This is part of why we give you stuff to do at the end of every one of these episodes. Because we don't want to just give you information. We want you to begin to act on it. And I'm telling you right now, it will be useless going through these videos if you do not step into some of the stuff we're inviting.